Now I want to try and do some more videos related to the end of the year. This list will be comprised of the games that I had some of the most fun with in 2020. There is definitely going to be some overlap as well with the underrated games list. And since I am just one guy, I did not get to play every game that came out this year, so if I didn't mention one of your favorites, let me know in the comments below. Okay, let's get started. When it comes to Sucker Punch, they are a great developer and have continually made solid games with each of their new series. Their first Infamous is one of my favorite games, and their most recent effort with Ghost of Tsushima is awesome as well. The sword fighting is great. You get a nice mix of different types of sword slashes along with useful gadgets to help you defeat enemies. Using the throwing knives was always fun as it could take out many foes. I never got tired of the combat system. It was both brutal and satisfying, and a lot of this was how easy it was to control along with the sound effects paired with your slashes. Blocking and parrying rounded out your moves along with having different sword stances that you could use. Lastly, your bow provides you with ranged options. Between the sword combat, different stances, and gadgets, these all allowed you to express yourself in different ways within the combat. Simply put, the open world is gorgeous and this factors into you wanting to explore the entire thing. The game does a good job of hiding the checkbox feel to all the pieces of side content, and that was appreciated. It helped to turn this familiar open world element into something that was more player initiated. When it comes to the story, it's very enjoyable and predictable at times. Jin is a solid character and I really enjoyed his struggle of him trying to defeat his enemies while also trying to maintain his honor. Ghost of Tsushima is a great swan song to the PS4 generation. Like many, I got my start with the Final Fantasy series with the PlayStation entries. This was my introduction into Japanese RPGs. The involving stories and interesting combat systems were all foreign to me at the time, but once I was able to sink my teeth into it, I didn't want to stop. FF7 is one that I continually look back on as one of my favorites. It cemented my love for this genre. The remake completely delivered for me. It makes a strong first impression for a returning fan. The entire first mission is a combination of getting your feet wet with the combat system and being flooded with nostalgia and fan service. For the first mission, I could not stop smiling. As I kept playing the game, I really enjoyed some of the additions, like how the remake added more development to Barrett's crew. Avalanche was mainly used as a piece of motivation for Barrett in the original, but in the remake they're more fleshed out, with Jessie receiving a lot more, and I really enjoyed her mission. When I finally got to the part with Aerith in the church, I was really impressed by how the developers nailed the characterization of the cast from the original PS1 game. Many of the modern Final Fantasy games do have certain elements of Final Fantasy nonsense to them. There is some of that here, especially with the ending, and where I didn't like the inclusion of the ghosts that would pop up in the story. Most of the narrative was great, and what really grounded it was how the characterization was done so well. This honestly felt like the developers trying to do something new while also honoring what people loved about the original. Some of my issues with the story may even be swept away depending on where they take it in the next entry. From a gameplay perspective, I really enjoyed the new combat system. It felt like a solid blend between the original game along with the newer, more action-focused Final Fantasy titles. The action approach made this feel more modern, while retaining the ATB bar made it feel all very familiar. From an audio and visual standpoint, FF7 Remake is outstanding. There are also many moments full of impressive visuals along with the combination of new and redone tracks. I absolutely love this game. Immortals Fenyx Rising turned out to be one of the best games this year. It's heavily inspired by Breath of the Wild while also putting its own spin on it. Immortals put you in the role of a hero trying to break a curse and save his brother. What helps to give the story a lot of personality is how the game is unexpectedly funny. Most of the story is narrated by Prometheus and Zeus. Prometheus mostly plays it straight, and this allows Zeus to provide the comic relief. The chemistry between the two of them is great and consistently funny. This helps to create a very tongue-in-cheek feel to how the developers go about presenting the mythology. There's still great epic epic encounters, but there's also this playfulness throughout the entire game, and it makes it very unique. Immortals does take Breath of the Wild's form of exploration. All of the exploration from the optional dungeons, chests, and activities are all player discovered. These items are not pre-populated like in most Ubisoft open world games. I do not mind the checklist format, but I did appreciate how Immortals was more about having player-initiated exploration. The gameplay is a nice mix between combat and puzzles. The combat is really solid. You have your light and heavy slashes. Your heavy slashes, along with other special moves, will help to fill up an enemy's stun bar. Once this is full, the enemy will be dazed and you can do extra damage to them. For defensive options, you can parry attacks and dodge many enemy attacks. The neat part about the dodge is that if you can time it just right, the game will go into slow-mo, allowing you to get a few hits in on any of the enemies. This sort of works like the dodge system from the Bayonetta games. The combat feels good and is rewarding. The puzzles are another bright spot as well. There's a large variety of them. Some of them can be decent head scratchers, but once you explore the environments and pick up on some of the clues you need to complete them, it's really satisfying. For the most part, the puzzles only have one way to complete them, so don't expect the experimentation like in Breath of the Wild's dungeons. But Immortals also doesn't have weapons that will annoyingly break, and there aren't any instances of you climbing a hill and then having a random rainstorm come in and cause you to slide down. I haven't beaten Immortals yet, but I have put over 20 hours into it, and it's easily one of the best games this year. Resident Evil 3 might be the shortest game that I played this year while also being highly replayable. I sunk about 45 hours into this game and I had a blast with it. I understand that some were disappointed with the elements being taken out of the original or older locations not being in this version, but one thing that I enjoyed about these recent Resident Evil remakes is how it retains the feel of the traditional Resident Evil titles while providing a modern approach to them. I completely understand the frustration with missing areas and mechanics within the remake, but I also look at this remake as a modern alternative to the original game. This remake does not replace the original, but rather exists next to it. Resident Evil 3 Remake provides a short and sweet experience with great pacing. For the most part, the game operates like Resident Evil 2 Remake with a higher focus on action. With many modern titles continually trying to eat up all of your time and bloated in many areas, I found this game refreshing as it was short and sweet and provided solid incentives for replaying the game. As you completed the game, you would earn different items and rewards from the endgame shop. This would help to change up the gameplay and what starting equipment you would have, and depending on the difficulty you chose, the enemy placement would be different as well. Where Resident Evil 2 was a scary experience, 3 feels more like a thrilling one. Sackboy is one of the best launch games on the PS5, and you can also find it on the PS4. This game is the perfect feel-good game from its tone. It's sweet, charming, and pretty funny. The platforming is enjoyable, and it provides you with plenty of levels to complete, along with a lot of items to find and earn. There's a nice variety to the levels, with some requiring you to complete the level with something chasing you, general exploration, puzzle solving, some combat, boss fights, and many more. Best of all, you can complete the entire game in both single-player and in co-op. There are even co-op specific levels designed with that in mind, and they are really rewarding to complete with a friend as you try to solve the different environmental puzzles. One of the best aspects of the game are the levels that are centered around different pop songs. The levels move to the music, and the developer's creativity is on full display. This is a Sony game that you do not want to miss. I love the Mafia games. The first game may be dated in its mechanics, but it tells a very timeless and memorable story. The sequel suffered from a troubled development, but still delivered a great story and a memorable set of characters. Mafia 3 retained the quality for rich characters and story while also expanding the gameplay sections of the series. Considering that Mafia 1 was dated in how it played, a remake was most welcome. The developers said that this was a labor of love for them, and it truly showed. Mafia Remake retained the characterizations from the original, and this was appreciated. When it came to the gameplay, it was solid across the board. The driving felt good, and options were provided for a more realistic experience if you so choose. The shooting received a nice upgrade, as the mechanics were pretty much lifted from Mafia 3. The shooting functioned like an expected third-person shooter, while providing some brutal impact with your kills. In many ways, the remake does feel delightfully old-fashioned. Mafia is a story-focused experience, and it's more of a direct experience. Do not expect to sink hundreds of hours into this title, but expect something that is worth playing for new and old players. The remastered theme is great along with the new soundtrack. Before I end this video, I want to give a quick mention to Zombie Army 4. The game is packed with a good campaign and fun horde modes. It is mindless fun that has lots of unlocks, and the developers are supporting the game with both paid and free content updates. So that is my list for my favorite games from 2020. What are some of your favorites from this year? I will be working on my worst games of 2020 list, along with underrated games from 2020 and indies from 2020. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.